All right. I'm excited. I've been looking forward to this for a bit. Welcome, Stan, to the Leaders Who Care series, first of all.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, I think people will see really quick why I invited you, and it's not because you have a cool name, Stan Chen. That's not the only reason I invited you, because I'm always jealous that you probably don't have to spell your name, as certainly as much as I have to spell my name. So, but no, you're doing some great stuff, and I wanted to chat with you about, where that came from and what you're doing and stuff. So, best place to start, as always, is if you can tell us who Stan is, like where you're from originally, where you are now, anything you want to tell about your family or siblings, maybe something you've never told anybody that you want to reveal to the world now. That's always kind of fun. You don't have to, but that's always kind of fun. And then we'll get into the business thing, because guys especially, the first thing they usually tell me is their title and what they do, and that's not who they are, type of thing. Part of, but not who. So who are you? Share.
Oh my God. And there I was getting ready to give you my name and my title, Mark. Why why did you lead with that?
I'm not as dumb as I look, Stan.
Who am I? Wow. I am um I would say basically I am a person who is focused around impact and change and making a difference.
Okay, so where are
At
you
the
from
core.
originally?
So I was actually born in Queens, New York,
Hmm.
as a first generation immigrant family. My parents came from Taiwan. And look, my dad is was actually an immigrant, as well as my mom. He grew up very, very poor in Taiwan, and it's fascinating just hearing the stories about how he grew up, and it it, uh, it actually just the amount of respect I have for my father, who to this day, he passed away 12 years ago at this point. But to this day, probably one of the smartest men I have ever met in my life. I like to tell the story of he was a math genius, just a genius in general. In fact, he used to sneak into school. They were so poor that my dad used to sneak into school at night to study for his exams, to borrow the electricity, the lights to study for his exams. And he managed to work his way into Taiwan University, National Taiwan University, which is the number one school in Taiwan. Got his degree, went on to become a nuclear engineer, immigrated over to the US, and built a successful life and business over here in the United States. But one of the things I love, one of the stories I love telling about my dad actually is he was so smart that at a certain point he had a successful business and he didn't need to really work that hard anymore, and his downtime would be going to casinos and playing blackjack. And you know, blackjack, it's the only game in the casino where the odds are slightly stacked in your favor.
Right.
So he would count cards. And after he got banned from a few casinos, he started playing the $5 tables because he just wanted to keep his mind sharp. He wanted to um, have those small little wins, let's call
Hmm.
it. And, but, you know, and have a little recreational time. So
Well, I have a feeling once we get to the influencer part, he's going to be one of them, for sure. Do you have siblings?
I do have an older sister. She's 1 year older. She is still living with my mom, but yeah, she and I grew up. Um, I am sad to admit that I am not as close as I would like to be with my sister. I was I was the overachiever and always um, kind of more independent. Let's put it that way. But yes, I do have an older sister, and she did actually finish her first year of law school, but she is right now I'm very grateful for her actually because my mom is definitely getting older and she is there to really be a companion for my mom. And
Well, there's a
I,
reason for everything. I generally think so. Good for her for being that person,
yeah.
because it's hard in general. So when you were a kid, then, since we're talking about siblings, were you the computer geek nerd at the time, or did you have the lemonade stand business, or music, dancing? What?
Well, look, my work right now is, as you know, but the audience might not know, was what I like to call the intersection of sustainability and technology. So the question about whether I was into computers or anything like that, not really. I was definitely a one of the classic overachieving immigrant households. And straight A's, look, straight A's were the baseline. All right.
Yeah.
I played violin, excelled in math and science, all the hallmarks of a traditional Asian upbringing. It's but in terms of computer science, no. But like you know, was really navigating the two worlds, right? The structured expectations at home and the Western society, which is obviously a lot more freeform, more expressive. And but that kind of duality definitely did shape me in terms of being very analytical, very curious, and I would say, yeah, very entrepreneurial from a young age. Absolutely, for sure. I definitely did want to build things, explore, intellectually curious, and just building. Now looking back, definitely building a foundation for trying to figure out how to make the world better, how to make it work better.
Well, I can relate. I do have a Jewish mother. So, um, and there's the old joke that on Christmas Day, the Chinese restaurants stay open because the Jewish people love going out for Chinese food on a Jewish holiday.
Well,
Um,
that
and
reminds me of that. You've seen that SNL episode, right?
I think so, right?
Yes.
But you see, what we just did is actually what's needed more in the world right now is laughing about this stuff and being okay with it and loving the differences, loving the similarities, and it's a whole other discussion. But it really is important that we're kind of a lot of ways the same. I want the same things and everything, you know?
Oh, I wholeheartedly agree with you on that one. I do think that it's, society really needs a little more understanding, a little more empathy. I mean, for sure, empathy, but the fact is, we are so much more connected than we realize, right? Across political divides, I mean, especially right now, it is absolutely important, crucial, essential for us to understand there are so many more things connecting us than dividing us. All right. We
100%.
all want love. We all want connection. We all want to find our own tribe, right? These basic, essential, like fundamental human conditions that, uh, I remember going out to Ohio, and we sat at this diner in the middle of nowhere, and started talking to these people, and he said to me, you know, you're okay for somebody from New York.
I like when they ask you, so where are you born? But they're expecting like God knows where somewhere else. It's that. Um, it was interesting. I don't know if I should even bring this up, but President Trump asked the leader of Liberia recently. He said, I don't know if you saw it, you speak such good English from where you're from, and their language is English, and it was
Right?
like he's not supposed to be even educated because he comes from Africa. Uh,
Uh,
you know,
oof.
so too much of that. But let me go to education for a minute because that's important for Chinese families and Jewish families and everybody. Um, what were you envisioning when, I mean, you went to Boston, you bachelor's in medical science, if I'm not mistaken, right? What were you envisioning then?
Look, yes, as you mentioned, I was in Boston University's 7-year BA MD program, straight out of high school. Look, that was a uh, Asian family, a huge source of pride for my family, especially for my father, who came from humble beginnings. And for his part, obviously, he worked and sacrificed really hard to give us these kind of opportunities. But um, look, in reality, it was their dream, not mine, right? I definitely did realize during my first year of med school that look, it wasn't what I wanted to do. That wasn't the kind of change that I wanted to make, one patient at a time. And it definitely set me on a different path. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I get it. I was supposed to be a sports broadcaster, but I went into accounting, so you can figure out what the scenario is there. Um, um, with respect to impact and whatnot, we started our firm, Fifth Element, on the premise that leaders and their organizations, whether they're corporates or startups or nonprofits, can do way better financially, economically when they're doing good at the same time. It's unfortunate it took us years and years and years and years and years and years to figure this out for some reason, but that's what we're based on. Was there an inflection point during the next few years after school to decide to then earn your ALM in information technology at Harvard?
Well, there was a few years gap before I went back to Harvard. So I
Hmm.
did travel around in Asia, mostly in Taiwan. Um, and when we talk about inflection points, I'm not sure what an exact inflection point was. Uh, Definitely those years of travel, going back to Taiwan, taught English for a bit, and then ended up opening my own English school in Taipei. Definitely did give me some real world entrepreneurial experience, as well as reconnecting with my roots for sure. But going back to ALM, I think the biggest inflection point was during that information technology program was that was right actually at the time of the dot-com crash. So it was very interesting. I saw the promise of technology, but there was let's call it a the void of purpose in that hype,
Hmm.
right? And going back to the recycling industry, really picking that mantle up that my father had started, it really allowed me to explore how technology could serve sustainability. And that really, I would say the inflection point in that was developing what RecycleGo, it became the foundation of RecycleGo for sure.
Yeah, and I want to get to that, to dig into that in a bit too. Was there any other were there specific initiatives or accomplishments like the school that really stood out for you, not necessarily business wise, but just your thoughts, your dreams, your goals, your life, basically.
School accomplishments?
Well, no, you said you started a school, for example. Accomplishments during that period that really stood out. Again, you could call it an inflection point or whatnot, but that really stood out that made you think deeper, made you decide to then go into the recycling that you can recall.
No, I would say my period in Taiwan, it was great for me to pursue uh, just going back to earn some money, understand my Taiwanese culture, teaching some English, um, and growing that, building upon that, uh, and having just this ambition to accomplish something more. Um, it's it's hard to say how that has like evolved. My period in Taiwan, one of the things that I've definitely been able to take away from that period is just um, understanding how powerful community and culture is, actually. I definitely feel that just through a lot of personal experiences, a lot more of a connection with my spiritual side. All right. And the physical world, and let's call it things that defy definition, right? That don't have, we can call it, it's so fascinating what science has defined right now, right? And what's beyond the realm of science because we can't define it yet. And the whole concept of quantum, right?
Yeah.
Quantum as in the act of observing something changes the properties of an object, right? On the quantum layer. The act that basically on the quantum level objects can have different states coexisting at the same time. The whole concept of Schrodinger's cat, right? Being alive and dead at the same time, and those are validated through quantum stuff like that. It's fascinating to me, and I think of that as an extension of spirituality, and it's given me a greater purpose, actually.
Yeah. And I wondered, the only reason I asked that is, and we talked before this a little bit about maybe a lot of this stuff was even around during ancient civilization, and so much wisdom comes from way back. If periods like you had and other people, and we allow people to let their imagination go a little bit and be more creative, and where are things derived from to get to the point that the next stage we're going through happens more properly, if you will, rather than just being theoretical or numbers or whatever it may be. Because, they talk about how the fourth industrial revolution is clearly AI and technology,
Mhm.
but the talk is also the fifth is about humanity. And how do you put them together? Like we've had some chatting on that too. And um, we in the work we do even, we're focused on talent, but we're focusing on talent using tech and making impact to complete the whole circle. So that's why I asked you about sometimes there's not necessarily a maturity that happens or an opening of our minds that happen when we do things like that before we do what you're doing right now. And it sounds like that happened a little bit, to you too. At one point, did you find yourself committed to recycling and more specifically the supply chain world? Because in my world, we talk about supply chain being the heart and soul of every company, really. So at what point did that happen?
Um, So it's very interesting. So recycling, a little background on recycling and my involvement is it was from my father, right? And my father moonlighted as a driver for Taiwanese scrap buyers on the weekends.
Well, your
And
dad was something else. He trespassed into schools. He moonlighted. Was it?
my dad was a nuclear engineer. My dad worked at a nuclear engineering. He designed and built nuclear power plants. Extremely like just brilliant, off the charts brilliant. And
He's like Hidden Figures. Did you ever see that movie?
yes. But it's just, look, I mean, it's, obviously, like just somebody who I just admire, I absolutely admire. Just he built his scrap metal, like this scrap metal business, and that's my connection to the recycling industry. So this kind of legacy. Um, so my commitment to recycling and supply chains, obviously, it comes from this this not only this desire to honor this legacy that it gave me, right, this business, but also to transform it. And ultimately, I saw recycling is, in essence, let's call it a reverse logistics supply chain, right? We're taking materials that are a waste, and we have to figure out the best economic model to collect it from the environment, build and scale it, and collect it and turn it back into valuable commodities that can be input materials for manufacturing, a circular, essentially manufacturing process, right? And that's where I said, you know what? Let's figure out how we can leverage technology to do that. And that's where the initial company, RecycleGo, came into being. We really dove into how we can use blockchain to provide that verifiable traceability for recyclables, for the emissions across supply chains. And trying to give the brands and the suppliers this kind of data transparency that they need to meet both their compliance and climate goals, right? And now with the new company Sinansys, it's actually the evolution of that using quantum computing to predict and mitigate disruptions. Now that we understood supply chains and all the data points using blockchain, now we're starting to use quantum computing to mitigate and predict disruptions from extreme weather, geopolitical shocks, and systemic risks, which are happening more often, these kind of like black swan events, because of the world we now live in, they're happening more often. Um, let's we right now, if we look at this, today is July 11th of 2025. Last week we had the flash flooding events that happened in Texas, Guadalajara,
Hmm.
and this kind of loss of life, these kinds of climate shocks are what we can bring to the system using a lot of the data and the tech and the knowledge around supply chains. So yes, so my commitment to recycling and supply chains has really been an evolution to really my commitment, for lack of a better word, to serve, to understand where I fit in society.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. I remember Ryder System used to be riding the trucks way back then was a client of mine. I remember when they were all excited where they just knew where the trucks were,
Hmm.
basically. And but you got to start somewhere, right? In the process, and kind of like when I was at Deloitte and the word processing department was all excited about the eraser being in the typewriter. It's like, you know, and you see where things are derived from, and but you got to start somewhere to develop. It seems to me like you got the whole package there of what you were looking for, where a business that can make you money, support your family, but at the same time impact humans and jobs and stuff and food supply that coming from different places, and at the same time help the planet at the same time. You kind of have it all, it seems.
Well, we all have to start somewhere, right, Mark?
I heard that somewhere, yeah. But it's true. You really are encompassing people, people, profit, planet, however that goes.
And it has, I don't know. I think business models have to incorporate all three. It really does at this point. I The reason we're in so much trouble in the first place is our economic models don't make any sense, right? Those kind of environmental or societal externalities, that should have been factored in when you designed that business, when you built out that business model. Well, all of that is coming home to roost, and we need a better system. We need a more evolved system, a more inclusive system that can take all these kind of externalities and that are integral to any kind of model going forward. And it is about people, planet, and profit. Absolutely.
Tell me a little bit more about how does RecycleGo and Sinansys work together? Tell us a little bit more about about that.
Well, so look, RecycleGo obviously is focused around was the original product in for helping companies recycle better. That evolved to a recycling blockchain, and understanding once we understood the recycling process, we really understood a reverse logistics supply chain. And when I was rolling that out, the conversations we were having was here's a blockchain for recycling. And the conversations we had with stakeholders, they were like, yeah, but if my customers aren't asking for it, why should I pay for it? Right. And I knew that um, I, I knew that this is what the world needs. All right. We need more information in order to have better options to do the right thing. I think people are inclined to do the right thing if they're presented with the proper choices, right? So if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, and blockchain allows you to do that. But as we built this out, we're like, wait a minute, we have a product and process agnostic platform to understand supply chains and the sustainability of supply chains. So Sinansys evolved into that, and also partnered up with a quantum as a service company, which is actually one of our investors, and they brought quantum on board to run all of these essentially quantum models to run multiple simulations. All right. Well, you know what? Now that I understand the supply chain, let's start understanding what happens around supply chain disruptions on each point in the supply chain, what's going to happen, and to build more resilient models. All right. And it is about being more proactive versus more reactive. I mean, we're in the point of crisis management right now,
Yeah.
right? All of these things. Well, if we have visibility, we can be more resilient. And a lot of my work not only allows companies to be more resilient on these what basically shocks, uh, but also build resilience into communities. We're talking about marginalized communities. We're talking about these events are affecting marginalized communities more and more. They're the ones that have the most economic impact, and they're the ones that are going to recover the slowest.
Well, I think certainly your mom is. I'm sure your dad is proud too because you are actually helping people's well-being in a way, anyways, versus becoming a doctor. You're helping people's well-being, anyways, in a great way. And so kudos on that. And I got, we say in LA, you probably know this. We say in LA, we got to leave them wanting more so we can do a sequel. So we may have to do that. But I got one more question in this part for you, and in 2021, one of my clients said to me about 2020, which was the COVID year, obviously, that was the year that flew by slowly, he told me. And I said, yeah, for real. And because even to this day, it sometimes feels like it was yesterday and also years ago at the same time. And now we're already in the last half of 2025. So with all that said, what are you most grateful for and what are you most hopeful for?
Oh, look, 2020, it's interesting that you bring up 2020, but obviously the global pandemic um, was game changing for everybody, right? We had such huge supply chain shocks. And at that period, one of the things I'm grateful for, but not really because of the conditions of the world that needed this solution. Was during that time, uh, I co-founded a initiative called Mask Force, and this was a rapid response initiative that it was basically leveraging my knowledge of supply chains, global supply chains from all of my years of shipping recyclables to Asia. Well, all of a sudden, we needed tens of thousands of N95 masks to the frontline workers, especially in the early days of the global pandemic in New York City. So we sourced the masks from China, clear customs, delivered them to hospitals in 10 days.
Wow.
So, and this was at a time when every day meant lives.
Right.
So for me, that was the first real impact use case we had for RecycleGo. So look, right now, I'm very grateful that this allowed me more clarity in terms of my vision, right? I'm very grateful that I hope to see a greater alignment with capital and climate, with innovation and empathy, right? Leaders are beginning to see that, look, resilience isn't just about tech, right? It's about really caring. And I think that's hopefully a huge, huge shift.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's it shows we can do great things beyond imagination and beyond impossible if we just want to and work together. So thanks for sharing that. And hey, I'm grateful that I got a new friend and you are a leader who cares. And that's the same reason I think I'm hopeful too for that. So thanks for being on the series and really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for having me.